We see the FAA's remote ID proposal as a critical step forward. There's a lot of good in the proposal. We think that remote ID is incredibly important. But that said, we also highlighted some few critical items that we think are very important for the FAA to fix before finalizing the rule.
You're listening to the Drone Radio Show podcast, the show about drones and the people who use them for business, fun, and research. Hosted by Randy Goers.
Hello, everyone. This is Randy Goers, and welcome to the Drone Radio Show podcast, episode 258. How does the commercial drone industry view the proposed remote ID rule? For that question, we turn to Lisa Ellman, the Executive Director of the Commercial Drone Alliance. The Commercial Drone Alliance is an independent 501c6 nonprofit organization led by key members of the commercial drone industry. The Alliance works collectively to merge policy with innovation to create relevant rules for operation. It educates on the economic benefits and humanitarian gains made possible by commercial drones and advocates for their safe and responsible use. It also brings industry and government together to solve some of the challenges facing the industry. Lisa is widely recognized as one of the world's foremost authorities on drone policy and law. She was featured in Fortune's Most Powerful Women series for her efforts to develop policy governing drone use in the United States. In addition to her role with the Commercial Drone Alliance, Lisa is also partner at Hogan Lovells and chair of the firm's Global Unmanned Aircraft Systems practice group, a one-stop shop for all legal and policy issues related to commercial drones. In this episode of the Drone Radio Show, Lisa talks about the Commercial Drone Alliance, its views of the proposed remote ID rule, and she shares other initiatives that the Alliance is currently involved to push the industry forward. But before we hear from Lisa, I want to thank those of you who are supporting my funding campaign. Whether it's $1, $100, or much more, you can help defray the cost of production and keep the podcast going and growing. Go to droneradioshow.com/donate. So let's learn how the Commercial Drone Alliance views the proposed remote ID rule with Lisa Ellman. Let's pick up the interview where I asked Lisa to introduce herself.
Thanks so much, Randy, for having me. My name is Lisa Ellman. I lead the Global UAS Practice Group at Hogan Lovells Law Firm, and I also founded and now lead an independent nonprofit called the Commercial Drone Alliance, which is an organization designed to move the commercial drone industry forward.
Lisa, what is the Commercial Drone Alliance?
So the Commercial Drone Alliance is an independent nonprofit organization led by key members of the commercial drone industry. Our focus is really on expanding the commercial drone industry, moving the commercial drone industry forward by working with the federal government, with other stakeholders to build on existing rules and create new rules of the road that allow for expanded operations for the commercial drone industry to really help the commercial drone industry take off and expand.
Can you tell us about its members? Who does the Alliance represent?
We represent virtually all vertical market sectors in the commercial drone space, from medical supply delivery to infrastructure inspection and precision agriculture and public safety, and so many other of the vertical market sectors of the industry are members of the Commercial Drone Alliance. So we have a really diverse set of companies in a fantastic group, and it's growing very quickly and continues to grow.
Can you describe some of the initiatives that the Alliance is currently involved?
Absolutely. So, this is a very timely conversation. Of course, yesterday was Remote ID Day, where the comments were due. So our Alliance put together some very comprehensive comments on the FAA's remote identification proposal. We're focused on many other policy areas as well. For example, tomorrow we're going to be filing comments on the FAA's type certification policy that they issued. And, our members work with the IPP and other pilot programs. We work with Congress in various executive branch agencies. And, the focus is really on moving the commercial drone industry forward, getting to expanded operations. So beyond visual line of sight, flights in urban areas, flights in city centers, enabling large UAS operations, moving, obviously getting small UAS off the ground as they are and expanding small drone operations, but also focusing on large UAS operations as well.
Speaking of the remote ID rule, can you share with us the Alliance's view of the proposal?
Absolutely. And I would encourage you all to visit regulations.gov and our website, which is www.commercialdronealliance.org, where we have posted our comment online. And I hope that you take a look, and we'd love to hear from you. We believe that the potential of the commercial drone industry and eventually the UAM, the urban air mobility marketplace, and more will really only truly be realized once we have expanded operations. So operations in urban areas, beyond visual line of sight, over people. And of course, we're all very aware that law enforcement and national security agencies have made it very clear that remote ID must be implemented in order to get to broad, expanded commercial drone operations. And so, we see the FAA's remote ID proposal as a critical step forward. There's a lot of good in the proposal. We think that remote ID is incredibly important. But that said, we also highlighted some few critical items that we think are very important for the FAA to fix before finalizing the rule.
What did the Alliance like about the rule?
So we support the broad applicability. We concurred with the threshold for remote ID, tying it to registration, which is very familiar to all of us in the UAS industry. We support the idea that there should be remote ID free zones in certain geographic locations, the FRIAs that were outlined in the proposal. We think that there needs to be some additional flexibility around the FRIA process, however. This is for commercial operators, but of course also for recreational operators. We disagreed with the 12-month application period for FRIAs. We thought that was overly restrictive. We don't believe that the final rule should put a time period or a time limit on filing FRIA designation applications. We think that there should be other flexibilities as well around the FRIA process.
And what did the Alliance feel were some of the concerns with the rule?
We promoted a network-based solution, so we believe that operators should be permitted to use network only when internet is available, subject to meeting performance requirements in their operating environments. So that was something that we focused on. We think that the FAA needs to clarify many of the terms and concepts that they use in the proposal, including as soon as practicable, the internet availability. There's lots of different terms that are used throughout the proposal that we believe need clarification. Privacy is a big area for our members. Operator privacy, there's significant privacy concerns, and we suggest some ways that the FAA could fix some of those privacy concerns. We propose for the commercial drone industry, we propose a known operator system, something like a TSA pre-check for drones or the known shipper program in that context, essentially creating another tier of secure remote ID that would have benefits for individuals who go through the process, undergo a background check, and including incentives in that for allowing greater operating privileges, for example, or be relieved of providing certain message elements if you qualify under such a system. So that's something that we put forward as well. Another big issue that we had, or a big question that we had about the proposal, was around indoor operations. Given just the proposal's requirements, and this may have been an unintended consequence, but given the proposal's requirements, we were worried that it might not be possible to fly a UAS indoors under the rule. And obviously, we all know that the FAA doesn't have jurisdiction over indoor space, and so we believe that the final rule should clarify that. We were supportive, and we are supportive of the Remote ID USS framework. We do believe that there should be retrofit solutions that are authorized. And if everything that we described is fixed in the proposal and the changes that we ask for in our comments are made, then we hope that the FAA prioritize prompt implementation and deployment of the remote ID system.
So in general, it's a good start.
Yeah, I think our members believe that it's a good first start, but some of the details need to be fixed or worked out.
Where do things go from here?
Yeah, so I believe that the FAA has stated that they are under a lot of pressure, or that they're hoping to get a final rule out by the end of the year. And so I know that there's been congressional pressure. I know that there's been a lot of interest from industry, of course, in getting a remote ID framework set up, given what we talked about in terms of expanded operations, remote ID being a critical component to opening up the industry. And so I know that the FAA is going to be working as quickly as they can to incorporate the comments. I will say I took a look, I think there's more than 50,000 comments that are filed on regulations.gov. So, that's quite a lot of comments that they do have to sort through in order to and respond to in the final rule. But that said, all of us will have fingers crossed that we see a final remote ID rule coming out sometime potentially later this year.
Does the FAA typically respond directly to the comments, or do they just issue the final rule?
They'll just issue the final rule, but they will, in that final rule, explain what commenters asked for and respond in writing to what commenters requested.
While the FAA works on the final rule, what will the Commercial Drone Alliance be doing?
Obviously over the next year or so, we'll be engaging, I would say, with the federal government, but also with other stakeholders in the community. I mean, in an ideal world, we can all kind of come to consensus around a set of what the industry wants. And that's something that we've worked with other industry associations over the last few months after the remote ID proposal came out. And there's a lot of work that needs to be done. I think one of the things that the FAA asked for comment on, but I think one area of broad agreement is the need for an early implementation or a way to incentivize implementation of a remote ID framework even before there's a final rule. So a voluntary remote ID framework. And how do we get that in place? And so there's a lot that industry can do even before, in the absence of a final rule, to start to comply with some type of requirement as kind of outlined in the ASTM framework that was put together in the standard. So I think that there's actually a lot that we can do now to try to move this all forward. But of course, in terms of formal comments and formal input into the final rule, that opportunity was kind of wrapped up yesterday with the comment deadline.
From your perspective, what are the top 2 to 3 provisions of the rule that you feel are critical in supporting the commercial drone industry?
The first thing that was important is the comprehensive nature of the proposal. That was at the requirement of the national security agencies. National security agencies have essentially been saying now for several years, there was an Ops Over People proposal that was put forward back in 2016. And that came to a halt because of security concerns. In particular, whose drone is that? The remote ID question, as well as counter-drone technology, how to mitigate potential drone threats. And so given that, essentially the lack of remote identification, in particular from the National Security Agency perspective, the lack of a comprehensive remote identification framework, it halted the development of expanded operations and broad authorization of expanded operations here in the U.S. That's something that we think is very important because, and we think it should be cheap and easy to comply and user-friendly. But because the national security agencies have been so focused on a comprehensive framework, we thought that was important. But that said, it's very important. The operator privacy provisions are critical. We think that the comment should promote network-based solutions. Again, like I said, we think that the comment should enhance flexibility around the FRIA process, including to support the recreational drone user community. And just, I guess, overall, I would say that we need to limit any unintended consequences that would unnecessarily restrict commercial or recreational drone operations. That's something that we're really focused on and that we try to express and explain in our comment.
Setting aside remote ID, what other policy initiatives should we be aware of?
Well, first of all, this type certification, there's this DNR process that's being put together, for the UAS community. Type certification is incredibly important, particularly because waivers and exemptions are so cumbersome and difficult to get for companies, that type certification is just an incredibly important initiative in our community. And so that's something that, like I said, we'll be filing comments on that tomorrow, but that's something that I would encourage the whole industry to be involved with. If you're a manufacturer, consider working with the FAA through that process. The hope is that we get to an efficient process that ensures safety, that really truly enables the industry to scale.
Can you explain what type certification is?
You can get approval to fly either through waivers and exemptions, like from the operator perspective, or from the system perspective, get a type certification like an unmanned aircraft is type certificated, right? You've gone through like a whole safety process with the FAA. And type certification is going to be key for really expanding the drone industry and getting regular package delivery operations, medical supply delivery operations, infrastructure inspections that go beyond visual on a site, flights over people in urban areas. All of this will I think, we'll see a whole lot more of this activity once we have a type certification process up and running. And so that's something else that we're working on and focused on and plan to file comments on this week. There'll be public comments, so everyone can take a look on our website. But also, I think continuing to seek to expand operations, helping the FAA kind of think broadly. I think, I know the IPP program is somewhat coming to an end, or at least will be entering into a new stage come October. So thinking, about what makes sense for the industry post IPP, how we can leverage the lessons learned during the IPP for the benefit of the whole industry. We're really seeking to expand, commercial drone operations. When there's a final rule on remote ID, we also expect to see, at least short after or maybe simultaneously, a final rule on operations over people. So we had filed our comments on operations over people. That proposal was pretty strict and, for example, wouldn't enable commercial drone operations over moving vehicles or over roads. That's something that we're really focused on. And that's something that we're, essentially the commercial drone industry will struggle to take off if we can never fly over any roads, right? That just doesn't make a whole lot of sense. So figuring out how to safely and securely integrate commercial drones into our national airspace, including getting expanded operations, is critical to the success of our industry.
Were there any lessons that came out of the IPP program that are worth noting?
Yeah, I think a few different things. I think that the IPP has been a fantastic program. And I'll name two things in particular for you. First, just going into towns and communities, even the application process for the IPP, right? Where you had towns and communities not saying, should I be banning drones over, my airspace? What are the concerns I have around the use of drones in my community? It shifted the thinking to towns and communities to say, wait a second, what can drone technology do for me? And what do I want to enable in the industry or in my community? And so shifting the thinking from just on kind of mostly focus on the negative to focusing on the positive. And we had about 200 jurisdictions or states, localities, or tribes or cities that applied to be a part of the IPP because they wanted drone technology to be a part of their community in a way that moves beyond what the current rules would allow. And that's a huge deal. I think that really helps us with public perception and helps kind of educate the public about what the issues are, what the benefits are around drones, both for public safety purposes as well as for commercial purposes. And then on the other side, I think kind of two sides of the same coin, the second item that I would mention is the executive branch and very high-level political support behind the program has put a lot of focus on what's coming out of the program. So let's try to streamline the process. The waiver process doesn't have to take, a year. Let's try to see what we can do quickly and prioritize these applications and also try to get to some meaningful approvals. And I think that we've seen some meaningful approvals through the process because of the high-level political support. For example, implementing the parachute standard to enable some drone operations over people was an important step forward, and there have been others. But really helping to bring a lot of top-level within the federal government, top-level attention to the success of the industry, I think has been a pretty important thing for coming out of the IPP.
When you look back at how the industry has evolved, what are your personal thoughts of what you've seen?
Well, I think, honestly, this is an incredible industry, and I love working in this industry so much because there are all these incredible companies doing all these amazing things. And I truly believe, you look at what cell phones were doing when cell phones were first invented. We used them for phone calls only. We didn't foresee that we'd be using our cell phones for our banking and for our emails and for our, all of our communications and keeping up with our whole network of family and friends as well as colleagues, right? So I think that the drone industry is very similar in that the use cases for drones are really limited only by our imagination. In 10 years, Randy, you and I can be having the same conversation, and who knows what the most amazing use cases will have emerged by then, because the creative thinking and how quickly the technology is evolving is just so exciting. Now, that said, I think that there's things that can be done to really expedite and move the industry forward more quickly. The technology has moved more quickly than the policy making. And I think that's where a lot of the challenges have come in.
Speaking of policy making, how would you characterize the mood of our policymakers on drones? Are they pro-drone, neutral, fearful?
Well, I think it's a great question, but I think one critical item is that there's no one view within the federal government. Just like even any individual federal agency is going to have 20 different viewpoints depending on which office you're talking to within the agency, right? So I think that there's many pro-innovation voices within the federal government who are incredibly excited about drone technology and want to enable the industry to succeed in order to unleash the many benefits of commercial and public safety use of drones for the benefit of society, and are truly passionate about that. But then you go to a different office in the federal government or a different office at a different agency, and they're really focused on the security concerns. And they're worried about, things like remote identification. They're worried about things like mitigating potential threats. What if a criminal's using a drone, and they're thinking through kind of all the what ifs and worried about that, and that keeps them up at night. And then you go to still another federal agency or another federal government entity, and they're focused solely on, what are some of the safety issues around integrating drones into our national airspace, and how can we do this in a way, the FAA is amazing at regulating manned aircraft, and there's been a lot of progress that's been made over the past several years. Part 107, of course, was a critical step forward, and we've seen, progress continue. But that said, there is still a lot of, it's a very conservative agency. There's no mandate or incentive for the FAA to be particularly innovative. Anything flying in the airspace could potentially, increase, even in a minuscule way, any risk to the national airspace, and that's what they're focused on. So it really depends on who you're talking to. There's no one overall federal government entity. They all have some very different concerns and interests. And I didn't even mention, Congress tends to be more focused on privacy issues. That's a whole other set of issues. So, I think that there's a lot of excitement. There's a general will that we want to move this all forward, and that the federal government wants to try to move this all forward. But that said, there are concerns as well. And that's what CDA and working with all of my clients from the Hogan Lovells side as well, we try to help educate the federal government agencies about the uses, about the technologies, about, what the potential is here, and how we're doing this in a way that is safe and in a way that is secure and in a way that is respectful of privacy, so that we can actually, move the industry forward.
Have policymakers voiced any concerns about the lack of a strong American drone manufacturer? The idea that nearly all drones are bought from DJI?
Yeah, and I think that there is some concern about that. I think we've seen some legislation on that, and we've seen some federal government agencies comment on that. But, the CDA hasn't really been involved with that. We've monitored the conversation. But, from our perspective, I think a key part of enabling the U.S. drone manufacturing kind of community here in the U.S. in the industry, crafting common sense regulations that enable the commercial drone industry to take off in a way that is safe and secure. And if we could open the marketplace here in the U.S., I think we're going to see the marketplace work its magic, and we'll see U.S. manufacturers succeed.
Now, you've been involved in the drone industry for how many years?
Several years. I guess I don't want to age myself, but yeah, many years.
Looking back, what was it about the industry that made you want to get involved, particularly when it was still very small?
Yeah, no, it's a great question. I mean, my background is from the federal government side. So I was working in the federal government. My focus working at the Office of Science and Technology Policy at the White House and at the Department of Justice was on enabling emerging technologies. And my last year in the administration, I was asked, given the congressional mandate to integrate drones into our national airspace, I was asked to help lead the drone integration effort from the federal government perspective. And at that point, it was still such early days. I mean, this was back 2013 or so, 2012, 2013. And I had actually first been given the UAS folder back in like 2009, right? So this was definitely on the federal government's mind, but it wasn't until the congressional mandate in 2012 that the whole federal government, not just the FAA, really started to pay attention to the mandate to integrate drones into our national airspace. And I just remember as I dug in, as I learned more about the industry, as I learned more about the technology, I was so excited and continue to be about all of the incredible use cases, what we can do if we can actually, open up this industry, and realized, I think at that point could really help the private industry more from the outside, help translate between Silicon Valley and Washington, D.C., help move expanded operations forward, help companies bring their incredible ideas to D.C. and present them in a way that policymakers and regulators understand and appreciate. And, that's what I try to do all day, every day, working with all kinds of amazing clients. And I feel so lucky to be able to do so.
What are you most proud of achieving in the industry?
Yeah, I think it's, recognizing kind of the gap in the marketplace in terms of needing a voice for the commercial drone industry in particular, and working with all of our incredible CDA members to build the organization that we've built, because I think we're doing a lot of amazing work. I think the board, it's just such thoughtful and incredible people who are truly focused on the future of the commercial drone industry and unleashing the full potential of the industry for the benefit of society, and working with such an amazing group of companies, and being a part of an organization, and just being a small part of an organization that really stands for opening the sky in a way that's safe and secure, in a way that we can all be proud of, in bringing the amazing benefits to the American people. So I definitely feel incredibly proud of the role that I've played in putting together that organization, but it's really all thanks to the members of the organization.
Lisa, is there anything that we miss that we should talk about?
I would encourage everyone to participate. I think there's going to be some more requests for comment, requests for information coming out of the federal government pretty quickly here. I know that they've been very focused, of course, on getting the remote ID proposal out, but now maybe that'll open up their ability to get some additional requests for comment out, and by all means, if you're interested in joining the Commercial Drone Alliance, we'd love to work with you. www.commercialdronealliance.org, focused on really trying to move the commercial drone industry forward, scaling our businesses, and bringing all of the benefits of commercial drones to the American people. So, we appreciate the support of many of your listeners and hope to work with you as well.
And for my final question, Lisa, what message would you like to leave regarding the future of the commercial drone industry?
I think that the future of the commercial drone industry is bright. It's moving forward. It's, the remote ID proposal was a critical step forward. I think that there are a lot of things that we need to get right, but I think there's so much excitement. Like I said, the use cases for commercial drones are really limited only by our imagination. And I'm just so excited by the work that the companies in our industry are doing to creatively push forward innovation. I like to talk about the concept of polyvation, bringing about policymaking that promotes innovation, and innovators working hand in hand with policymakers. And I think that that's really how we're going to get to bring our industry to the next level.
And that's it for episode 258 of the Drone Radio Show. I hope you enjoyed hearing from Lisa Ellman of the Commercial Drone Alliance. I want to thank Lisa for taking the time to speak with me. If you want to learn more about the Commercial Drone Alliance or want to connect with Lisa, check out the website at commercialdronealliance.org. If you like the Drone Radio Show, please consider supporting the podcast with a small donation. The content is always free, but for as little as $1, you can help defray the cost of production. To donate, go to droneradioshow.com/donate. And thanks for listening. Your support means a lot to me, and I hope you'll listen to more episodes of the Drone Radio Show podcast to hear how others are using drones for business, fun, and research. For the Drone Radio Show, I'm Randy Goers.
This has been the Drone Radio Show podcast. More information on today's show can be found on our website at www.droneradioshow.com. If you're using drone technology for business, fun, or research and would like to share your experience on the show, please visit our website and fill out a guest appearance application. And don't forget to follow us on your favorite social media channels.